So another thing that really stuck out to me, for anyone not in the know, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this who are familiar with you already know about this, but you had a pretty big smear piece about you published by the New York Times, and you break it down in this. I gotta get used to it's on this side. You break it, you break it down in this book in a chapter, and you break down a lot of things. I don't want to give everything away because I want people to go read the book themselves. But, in particular, like there were these, just little small like things insulting your comedy even. And then you broke down like what those quotes actually were. And, it reminded me of like this small, for instance, obviously this pales in comparison to being smeared by the New York Times. But when I was starting out in comedy, and this was when I was still living in Pittsburgh, this guy who wrote for like just one of the local, like it was Pittsburgh Magazine or something, just one of those small little city papers, he wanted to do like a big thing about the comedy scene. And we were all excited about it. It was a big deal. So he was showing up at all these open mics, and he was like around the same age as all of us, like early mid-20s at the time. So he was pretending like he was our friend even. And what we didn't find out until later was like his big goal was to just make us all look like complete losers. Oh yeah, totally, man. And it was and I remember getting a phone call by like fact checkers or whatever, and they would be like, "So what you said was da 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 da," and I'd be like, "That's not actually what I said." Like he's kind of taking that. He's kind of repurposing that to fit whatever narrative he's trying to sell. Like you would say something like, so at an open mic, you try out a new joke, and if it doesn't get laughs, you rewrite it and try to rework it so that it does work. And what he wanted to print was none of these comedians ever get laughs. Like, look at them and they're dumb. You know what I mean? And they were like, so did you say that everybody sucks, basically? And I'm like, no, that's not what I said. And then what do you think got printed anyway? And I remember one of the girls who was like coming up with us, she was so bummed out about the whole thing that she quit comedy. And to this day, I really do not like, I have a grudge against this guy to this day. I'm like, dude, you wanted to make some dishonest article, like poo-pooing on a local comedy scene for no reason other than to try to enhance yourself. And she got robbed of so much because of you. And that's just so horrible. And so anyway, that's just a small for instance of like how reporters at times will just kind of misconstrue things to fit their narrative. So
they come at you with the narrative that they want to portray, and meanwhile, these other people, the mainstream comedians or whatever, they get these fawning pieces written about them in all these articles. They could say all kinds of shit, and they're going to get these wonderful articles about how great they're doing and how funny their stuff is and everything. But I knew going in that chances are the New York Times, which, their job is to manufacture consent for war or consent for, unfettered capitalism. Right now it's manufacturing consent for this bailout, which is the largest theft maybe America has ever seen by the time it's all done. And that's their job. So I knew they weren't coming at me in a positive light, but I've never tried to deny them from seeing my stuff. So I gave the guy a free ticket to my stand-up show in New York. And, then I ended up titling the article, How to Do Propaganda for the New York Times, based on an attack piece against me, because I could see every detail of how you create this type of propaganda. And, some of it is hilarious. I mean, it was so ridiculous that they ultimately issued multiple retractions on that article, which for the New York Times is no small thing. They don't like putting retractions. Hey, we got this wrong at the beginning of their, at the end of their articles. Of course, they leave the piece up because they're fine with a bunch of other horse shit in there. But they did issue multiple retractions. But it was everything from like pretending that he said he heard burly Russian men laughing about my show outside of the live show in New York, when in fact the reason he heard burly Russian men outside my show in New York is because, completely unconnected to my show, they're at the Cutting Room in New York. There was a Russian rapper performing after my show had ended, having his own show, and there were lines of Russian Americans waiting to get into his show because they liked his Russian rapping. And so this journalist, so-called, at the New York Times, either decided not to figure out why those people are speaking Russian outside of my show, Or, which is the worst journalist ever, why not ask them? They speak English, I'm sure. There. Hey, why do you like Lee Camp? And they go, who? We're here to see Noise the rapper. And then, or he knew that they were not there for me and decided to just flat out lie in the article. I mean, but it's just tons of stuff like that. That is one tiny example. And, you know, these hit pieces were done against me in the New York Times and NPR's Weekend Edition within the span of a few months. It just seemed that they were designed to, you know, delegitimize what I do and make sure that any Google search, the first thing that comes up, because Google heavily weights towards legacy media, as they call it. So the first things that are going to come up are the attack pieces in New York Times, NPR, and then also Wikipedia can only quote, you're only supposed to source from sources like New York Times or CNN. You're not allowed to source from things like my own show or my own Facebook or my own articles written for TruthDig. You can't source from those things. So therefore, all the sources about me are from an attack piece in the New York Times. So it really is like this cyclical thing designed to really downgrade and attack someone.
So what was it like for you when you first saw that article? Like, I mean, so you knew it was coming. They had contacted you. You knew they were going to write something. What was it like for you when you first saw it?
Yeah, I knew he was going to write something. I didn't know how much trouble he'd go to, like, manufacture a fake world about me. Talking to, like, he talked to someone who quit RT America 2 months before my show started airing, and she claimed she was there at the beginning of my show as it was airing, and that it was, you know, all useful idiot stuff. And anyway, she just completely falsehoods. And so I didn't know the level he was going to go to. When I first saw it, and I also didn't know it was going to be on the cover of the arts section. Like they actually put it in the front of the section and made a big deal out of it. When I first saw it, it was upsetting and it pissed me off. But ultimately, it was a blessing in disguise because it allowed me to really internally see and point out this propaganda. And, you know, that's why I hope people will check out the book and see it for themselves, because I think it woke a lot of people up, you know, to actually see, like, no, this is my life, and he's made up stuff about my life. Another thing said in the article, which you can appreciate as a comedian, is he talked to a club owner in New York, and he claimed the club owner said, we would never book Lee Camp on a weekend. Basically, we would never put Lee Camp up in front of larger crowds. We'd only put him up on the off nights. But that's not what the owner said, because I talked to the owner. The owner said that we are a showcase club, so we don't have headliners on the weekends. Lee Camp is a headliner, so therefore he wasn't really playing here on weekends. It really was like completely different than how he portrayed it.
Yeah, like he's basically saying on the weekends, we don't rely on a name to draw, which Lee Camp is a name, but we're a club in New York, so we get tourists and stuff like that. So we just do showcases on the weekends. And the writer heard what he wanted to hear.
Right. And that owner also claimed that he said, well, you know, he's political. And so what Dennis Miller and Janine Garofalo and Mark Maron were to their generation, Lee Camp is to our generation, is one of the things he said. Incredibly flattering. Of course, that was not in the New York Times.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that was what made me think of the open mic article guy, actually. That was what reminded me of that, where it's like, oh yeah, they hear what they want to hear when they want to make somebody look bad. So did you talk about that on the show too? Because I know a lot of the content here is based off of monologues that you've also done on the show, correct?
Yeah, I don't think I ever covered the New York Times thing on the show. There's probably about a third of the book was never done on Redacted Tonight, but a lot of it does. You know, I kind of have a process now where I create a monologue for Redacted Tonight, then I create something based on the same topic, sometimes for formerly TruthDig. Now that has collapsed due to a horrible publisher. And you know, so I'll write that for an online publication often. And then this is the first book based on that stuff. So.
Can you actually do you know anything about what happened with TruthDig exactly? Because all I know is that it's just no more, but is there anything you're able to share?
Yeah, I wasn't, I kind of was tangentially involved. I kind of was told about it at the day before it happened. basically, the publisher did not like that that Truthdig was not MSNBC. Basically, she wanted to be the kind of faux, faux resistance kind of neoliberal MSNBC anti-Trump page, and instead, thanks to Bob Scheer, the legendary journalist who was editor-in-chief, Truthdig became well known for being, anti-Russiagate, standing up against neoliberalism, standing up, against this pretense that everything was right in the world under Obama, and that he was this wonderful president, and there were no wars, and all was peaceful, and we were all skipping and high-fiving. And so they became known for that, thanks largely to Chris Hedges, the most popular column at the site, and Bob Scheer, the editor-in-chief. And apparently she wanted to get rid of Bob Scheer, the editor-in-chief, Chris Hedges, the most popular columnist, and then me. Those were the three big ones she was trying to purge. And also, this part I had no idea about because I'm not working at Truthdig. I only contribute from afar. Apparently, she had terrible labor practices. She had workers sign things saying they were not accountable to California labor law, and I didn't know any of that. So anyway, she was pushing Bob Scheer out, and Chris Hedges and the others, several of the top staff at Truthdig, decided, listen, we're going to go on a work stoppage until she brings back Bob Scheer and at least talks to us about our other demands. And at the day before, Chris asked me if I wanted to sign on to it. So I said, sure. I'll stand with the workers. And so they then she, much to their surprise, refused to ever even meet with them, which apparently is, wow. I hear that's labor law, is that the employer or publisher is supposed to at least meet and discuss demands, even if nothing comes of it. And she never met with them and ultimately just dissolved the site. So as far as I know, that's as much as I know. But a lot of brave workers. I don't want to take any credit for it because I was just told about it the day before. But
sure. Well, have there been any talks? I mean, is everybody potentially going to migrate somewhere else? I mean, it was a huge service, and do you know if there's any talks of moving elsewhere or a new site forming, perhaps?
There is talks of moving elsewhere. I don't know what I'm allowed to reveal about that, so I won't say anything more. Right. But there is talks about moving elsewhere. I have published one column for a Consortium News, so if people are looking for my stuff, they can go there. Also, a site that I'm a huge fan of and have written for before is Popular Resistance. So I know that if people are looking for what the area that Truthdig used to serve, I think Popular Resistance is a great one to go to.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your news